All right, guys. Like you said, I am Dr. Elias Clinton. I'm an assistant professor of special education. Thanks for having me here. Thanks for being here. We got a lot to cover, so I'm just going to jump right into this. So assistive technology is something that I've been interested in for a while, both from a research perspective as a professor and when I was a public school special education teacher for 7 years. I used a lot of assistive technology in my classroom. So from a practitioner standpoint, it's something I've been very immersed in for a while. Something to just make you aware of before we start going through this. I'm in the process of building an assistive technology kit that I wanted to have built prior to this presentation, but I had to order all these products. They're slowly trickling in. I have 2 of the 50 products of this assistive technology kit that I'm building, but the purpose of this kit is for future presentations like this to give you guys more of a hands-on experience with these assistive technologies so you can see what they do, how to deploy those. But also, once this is together, when you guys are in your field placements, your practicum, your student teaching, I want to make these resources available to you guys. So if you feel like you work with a student who could benefit from assistive technology, you can come check these tools out to use in your classroom. And if you find it beneficial, then the school can likely arrange it so that student could have a device like that in the long term. Okay, so know as we go through this, I'm going to give you some examples. There will be those items available for checkout for me in the future. Okay, that's in the works now. How many people in here are actually special ed majors? Okay, some familiar faces. Good, all right. Good. All right, everyone else, this is going to apply to you, not just for kids with disabilities. Assistive technology has a lot of implications for kids who just struggle in general. We'll talk about that. So, that's kind of what I want to have accomplished by the end of this presentation. Those are my objectives. Give you a second to read through those. So what is assistive technology? Let me give you a definition, just so you know what I'm talking about when I'm here talking about assistive technology. And you'll probably hear me refer to it from this point on as AT. It's a lot easier to say, less of a mouthful. AT. What is IDEA for those SPED folks out there? Oh, come on. Don't let me down. It's a law. What's that? What does it stand for? Non-SPED majors? Anybody know? It's the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Okay? What does it do? Does anybody know that? So, IDEA, a little debriefer here. IDEA is a piece of legislation. It's a keystone piece of legislation for special education. It defines what special education is. It warrants services for kids with disabilities. It has a bunch of safeguards for kids with disabilities and their families. Okay? It is essentially the Bible of special education. You can think about it like that. Okay? So it defines what special ed is. IDEA defines AT. Okay? And basically, in a nutshell, this definition they give us, it's any item, it's any program, software. It can be something that you purchase commercially. It can be something you made on your own. It's a modified product. But it basically increases the functional capacity of a struggling student. And so it defines it as kids with disabilities. I'm going to branch this out more to just struggling students in general can benefit from these devices. Okay? So that's what assistive technology is. So under IDEA, that key piece of legislation, there's some specific things like free and appropriate public education. You cannot deny a kid with disability access to a free and appropriate public education under that law. And so, IDEA says that schools are required to provide assistive technology to kids with disabilities if it gives them access to a free and appropriate public education. So, if you find, like in my example with my kit, if you check out an assistive technology item and you use that with a kid in the school and you find it's beneficial and it gives that kid access to a curriculum, schools have federal money that funds that kind of thing. So if they find that device benefits that student, they will pay for it. Okay, so those are provided by schools. And just to sum this up, what's an IEP? You got to know that, right? Yes. Right. Every student who places into special education has an IEP. Basically, it's a tailored individual program for that kid. We prioritize what do they need behaviorally, what do we need to support them academically. That's the IEP. And that law says that the team who writes that IEP, you have to at the least consider using assistive technology with students with disabilities. From my perspective, I think it should go beyond just considering. Given the proliferation of technology, look around you. It's everywhere. And there are so many applications and devices to support students. There really is not an excuse that we shouldn't have some kind of technological support for pretty much every student. In the past, historically in special education, we've primarily used AT as supports for kids with more severe disabilities. Think about kids with orthopedic impairments, kids who have mobility issues, or kids who are nonverbal. They would use communicative devices or devices like eyesight devices to trigger things for those kids, that population. Now we have so many academic softwares and just things in general that can help any kid who's struggling. So it's not just for kids with severe needs anymore. And so we're trying to change that mindset. So why use AT? Well, you're going to hear arguments against technology, especially assistive technology. These are kind of fading the more we progress, okay? There's this, and this was about 10, 15 years ago, this was the argument that was always thrown in my face when I brought up assistive technology with kids with disabilities. What if they become dependent on the technology? Okay? I think that would have been a valid point 15 or 20 years ago when technology wasn't so prolific. But now, I think it's a shallow argument. Okay? Because as a special education teacher, if I'm bridging the gap for a student between their disability and access to curriculum with technology, I've given them a tool. And so that's what I'm primarily concerned with. Again, 15, 20 years ago, maybe I could see this issue because, all right, so I worked in a secondary setting, middle school, high school. I worked with a lot of kids who struggled in math, okay? I advocated for calculators for these students because at secondary level, if we're still trying to teach kids how to do multiplication facts when they're 16, 17, do you think that's an efficient use of their time? No, that's a waste of their time. It really is. That's like teaching, you're trying to teach letter sounds to a high schooler who can't read. Why do that? Why fight that fight? You need to have a more functional approach to teaching those students. And so if I could give a high schooler with a disability who couldn't do basic computation, if I could give him or her a calculator, and that would bridge the gap to doing more grade level tasks, cool. But the argument is, well, what if they don't have a calculator? When are you ever not near a calculator these days? Realistically. So we use that. I once had someone tell me that if you were in the position where you don't have a calculator at your disposal, then you probably got a lot bigger problems than calculating slope and intercept, right? So you're either on a deserted island or you're in a socioeconomic status where those things aren't relevant to you, okay? So I think it's a shallow argument to say, well, what if these kids become dependent? If it gives them access to things they didn't have access to in the past, that's the big thing. These are just some of the things that we can do with technology. So we can teach kids social skills, play skills. We can enhance communication, academic access, academic success. Like I said, these are just a few of those things that we can do. So there are much more benefits, I think, than drawbacks of using assistive technology for these students. Under this hypernym of assistive technology, there are actually some subcategories, so we can break down assistive technology into 3 different categories. There's low tech, and basically this just means things that are non-electronic. Okay? There is mid tech, which are battery powered devices. What do you think the next one is? High tech. There you go. And this is computer, software, advanced communicative devices, things like that. There's a more practical way to think about this continuum. Cost. You know, this is more the formal definition for that categorization of AT. Really, software costs more than battery-powered devices, which cost more than non-electronic devices. Okay? But do know we can break it down into those categories. Okay. Let's talk about low-tech AT. So again, these are things that are not battery-powered. Can you guys see that? It's kind of small. Huh? Pencil grips. Okay. I want to point out here, if you see an asterisk next to these items that we're going to go through here, these are items that will be available in that AT kit that you guys can check out. Okay. So, pencil grips are these things. Some of you were in 300 with me, weren't you? So you've seen a lot of this. You can just talk about this if you want. I'm just playing. So, pencil grips. All right, you ever seen these? You ever used one of these? Seen kids use them? Do you like them? What do you like about them? That's true. If you think back to being a kid, we used pencils a whole lot, and they still do. But these days I pretty much type, so that's a whole nother argument of what are we doing there. But if you hold a pencil all day, you get those grooves and it hurts, okay? It makes writing a little less aversive to kids to use those. Especially if you have a kid with an orthopedic impairment who may have fine motor difficulties. That's a great device for that kid. And also, I've had kids just with behavior disorders who were very reluctant to write. Give them one of these, and for whatever reason, it becomes motivational. I'm cool with that. If it makes them more motivated to access that assignment, cool. Go for it. I'll take it. Color coding. How many of you guys do this just in everyday life? Okay, right. That is a very simple assistive technology. Okay? I used to do this all the time with my kids. Most kids with disabilities, think frontal lobe, executive functioning, organizing content, they really struggle with that. So most kids need some kind of visual prompting system like this. So with my middle schoolers, my high schoolers, I would give them colored folders and corresponding colored notebooks to say, yellow is math. Worksheets, study guide, homework goes in the yellow folder. Classwork, you do it in the yellow notebook. It keeps them a little more organized. Tried and true, simple approach. Slant boards, I've got a few of these. This is one of the items that I've ordered that actually has come in. But it basically just creates this surface at a 45-degree angle. What do you think that would be beneficial for? Kids can see it better. If you have a kid who's already struggling with writing, and the task of writing when you're just because you're leaning over, it's kind of an awkward position to write in general. This just makes it much more accessible. It's a lot easier for them to write, and it clamps it in place. Okay, a lot of kids respond very positively to a slant board just because it makes the process of writing much more less arduous. Okay, you seen Evo pens? Anybody ever use one of these? They have them in the bookstore.
Well, I'll see you Tuesday.
These guys.
You too.
What do you think the point of an Evo pen is? It's exactly. It's a more comfortable grip. Again, holding a pen. I remember in one of my graduate courses, my professor made us memorize the entire definition of emotional behavior disorders according to IDEA, and we had to handwrite it out with a pen. I don't know how meaningful that was. What I remember from that was how much I literally did the stereotypic afterwards. Because writing with a pen for long periods of time kind of stinks. Especially if that kid has fine motor impairments or orthopedic impairments. Holding this position for long periods of time is painful. And they're less reluctant to write. This is a much more natural position for your hand. Okay? I know a lot of people who do not have orthopedic impairments who just prefer these. Like I said, they're in the bookstores. Check them out. Writing guides. These guys. You guys are you all like secondary? Some people elementary? All over the place?
There's only 3 secondary.
Okay. Good. So if you work with students who struggle with writing, you see this more commonly in early grades. Do you see it in secondary placements? Absolutely. But in early grades, I used to use these a lot because it's basically a rubber overlay, and we have these in the kit, that you put over a sheet of paper, and it gives kids a physical floor and ceiling within which to write. Again, it just makes the process easier. Okay, so they actually, because of the rubber, so these are basically rubber strips. That's a rubber border, so they can only write between the lines. Okay, makes it much more efficient for these students. These things, reading guides. You ever seen these? Or reading helpers? They give them out free all the time. These are good for a couple of reasons. And the color thing, we'll talk about that in a second. But the reading guides, it does one of two things. One, it allows students who have eye tracking difficulties, which is a thing. A lot of research has shown that fluency of reading can be thrown off by kids' eye tracking. And so with one of these, they can actually put it on the line so they see, it kind of eliminates a lot of those words to where they're just looking at the line that they're reading. So it helps them to focus on the relevant stimuli. They can also be magnifiers, so it makes the word larger. What population of kids would that be beneficial for? If it makes the words larger. Kids with any kind of visual impairment. Also kids with ADHD. It makes it pop out more. They're a little more likely to attend. Here's something to say about these guys. A lot of the time, there's been this research saying that like different colors, when we put different colors over text, it makes the contrast makes it easier for kids to read and comprehend. That's kind of garbage research these days. We know it's not true. But again, if it's motivational for kids, that's great. All right, so I'm going to kind of fly through these next couple of two. So we've got raised line paper. That's kind of the same thing as the overlay, but it actually, the lines are raised, so they stay in between the lines. There's enlarged text worksheets. That makes sense. You can map it. Math stamps. I think these things are fantastic because it's actually, there's a whole collection of them, and the kids can just do this. So instead of sketching out a coordinate plane, it's just done for them so they can just focus on the process. It just takes a step out of it for those kids. Things for positioning for young kids or for kids who have orthopedic impairments just to sit at a desk. They might need some kind of support like this. Okay. Zoom caps just makes letters of a keyboard larger for those kids with visual impairments. Okay. Fidget bands, I have a few of these in the box. Basically bands that just go around the bottom of a chair for a kid to bounce their feet off of. Much more preferred than that kid running around your classroom, right? All right. Let's talk about mid-tech. I'm going to kind of flip through these because we're getting short on time. See which ones I want to really focus on. Time timer. I think this one's huge. Okay? And so what it is, it's a visual timer. So if you're working on a kid on staying on task in your classroom, you probably don't want a timer that's going to be vibrating and distracting other kids. Here's a visual timer that just shows that red shows how much time they need to be working. And when it runs out, they can reset it. But there's no vibration, there's no sound. It's simply a visual timer. What's really cool about these is now they have watches, and with modern technology, there's an app. Okay? So to use with secondary students. Talking dictionaries, AlphaSmart was basically just these are kind of dated, but I think it's great because it's a portable word processor. Students can type at their desk, you plug it into a computer, print out their work. Audiobooks. Audiobooks can do a lot of things for kids who struggle with reading, dyslexia, kids who are blind. Here's my caveat about audiobooks. Okay, I think audiobooks are fantastic. Books on CD or MP3 audiobooks that you download. We use them in classrooms. How many people have ever seen a teacher use an audiobook in a classroom? How many times when they do that do they also have the kids sit in front of their textbook or the book that they're reading? Does that happen a lot? Here's the thing. Research shows if you really want kids to pick up information from audiobooks, just let them listen. If you say follow along, which we always do, what do you think is going on in that kid's head? They're listening, but what else are they doing? They're trying to track it, and they already have difficulty reading. So you've got two cognitive processes going on where they really just need to be listening to get that info. Okay, so take that with you. All kinds of calculators, from talking calculators, big button calculators for kids with visual impairments, money calculators. Let's talk about high-tech AT real quick. Let's see. Basically, this is for communication boards. You can create for kids who are nonverbal. You use these to create devices where kids can press buttons for I need help, I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, etc. This is a pretty cool device. It uses specialized paper, but it's a pen that will give you feedback on your work. You can actually do math computation, and you run this over, and this laser detects what you've written, and it will tell you whether it's correct or not and give you feedback. Pretty amazing. Kidspiration Inspiration is a way to create graphic organizers, which are huge for a lot of people.